The previous video was titled, "Can Russia ever be a superpower?" And I received an incredible critique, or I would call it an analysis, by a Syriana analysis follower. His name is Branislav Vasic. And he disagreed with the notion that a cultural hegemony is needed for Russia to become a superpower. So if you haven't watched that video, I would really like you to go and watch that video and come back to this so that you understand the notion of this video. Now, Vasic says that he disagrees with me on the premise that the idea of cultural influence is necessary to become a superpower. One important question to ask is this: what causes these color revolutions to succeed? Good question. He says, I think there are three important factors. Number one factor is the economic factor. The whole premise that color revolution is based on is the economic one. When youth looks at the West and how well people live in the EU and the United States, some of them start thinking that if they just overthrow their government, they can start living like them as well. I agree with this interpretation or this comment. To be honest, a lot of people also, because I've been to Armenia many times, also many people in Armenia think if they just overthrow their government and what they did in 2018, they would just be like Europe, like this. So this is a very simplistic way of thinking by some youth, and they are manipulated, to be honest, by the media outlets, by the news, by these non-governmental organizations who are persuading them to rise against their governments and promising them a better life. I mean, if you are a youth, you would also like to have a better life, especially in a ex-Soviet Union country like Armenia, where the living conditions are not really good. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the fact that the living standards in Europe, at least in Europe or in Western Europe, is very good comparing to, for example, countries like Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, or these countries who witness color revolutions. For example, if I'm 18, 19, 20, 21, what I really would be interested in is a quality education, which Europe has. And not only quality education, but also educational opportunities like scholarships and the exchange programs, such as the Erasmus, right? I would also be interested in job opportunities after graduation. And because of the larger economies in Western Europe, they have also bigger job opportunities, but most importantly, also well-paid jobs. For example, if you're an engineer in Armenia, you would gain between $300 and $500 per month. If you're working in public sector or in a company, like a medium-sized company. If you're very, very lucky and you found a job, engineering job, let's say, in a very good company, which is a large company or a multinational corporation, there you would maybe gain $1,000. But if you compare the salary with Western Europe, the salaries for an engineer starts from 2,500 euros, right? But the thing here is also we have to calculate the differences in the living standards. We have to also take into consideration that your expenses in Armenia are way less or fewer than in Western Europe. But in general, the living standards in Europe is way better than in Armenia or in Ukraine or in Georgia. So there is this motivation by these younger people to rise against the government and to have, in order to secure a better lifestyle for them and for their families. The second factor, according to Vasic, is informational factor. If the youth is constantly bombarded with the idea that they can just overthrow their government and start living better, then they will be more likely to believe in it. I also agree with this notion, and the example of this is also Armenia. I'm bringing Armenia because I know the situation there more or less. And the youth were bombarded with the idea that if you remove the Russian oligarchy regime in Armenia, then a person will come like Nikol Pashinyan and he will turn the table upside down with a magic stick, and he will convert Armenia from an ex-Soviet Union country that is poor and the living standards are low into like a Western country. So do we have to ask a question now? Pashinyan has been in power now from 2018, so 19, 20, 21, and this is his 4th year in power. How much improvement did he bring in Armenia? On an economic level, there is a slight economic improvement, the least to say, but have the salaries increased dramatically? Has the living standards increased dramatically? Or, if we want to measure this in a more scientific way, has the gross domestic products, or the GDP, has increased in Armenia? I just made some comparisons, and I found out that Armenia between 2010 and 2018, the highest GDP of Armenia was 7.5%, and the lowest during this period was 0.2%. Now, after 2018, meaning after the color revolution in Armenia, also the highest GDP was 7.6%, and this was in 2019, so a year after the revolution. But now, like around 2020, because we still don't have the official numbers in 2021, the GDP of Armenia is minus 7.4. And I don't know if the war that erupted between Azerbaijan and Nagorno-Karabakh played a role, because the war erupted in late 2020. So what happened during 2020 that led to this sharp decrease in the GDP? Like it was plus 7.6, it decreased to minus 7.4, so almost 10% minus under the leadership of Nikol Pashinyan. So the promise of converting Armenia into some Paris or some Vienna or some Berlin, it seems that failed during these past years. And the same thing, I think, applies for Georgia and Ukraine. People got rid of the pro-Russian governments, and we do not see this dramatic increase in the living standards as the youth were wishing for, or some of them. Now, Vasic goes to the third factor, which is the military factor. He says, if Russia takes a passive stance and doesn't do anything like in Ukraine or in Georgia, then color revolution succeeds. If they act quickly, then it fails. Now, the same question applies, in my opinion, to Armenia. In 2018, why Russia didn't stop the color revolution? And I'm not asking for a military intervention to stop it. If they wanted to, in my opinion, they were able to do it economically and politically, but they didn't. So the question here is, was Moscow unable to intervene through the CSTO, or the Kremlin thought they can contain the damages in Armenia after the color revolution, that is a small country comparing to Ukraine and Kazakhstan? This is a legitimate and good question. What do you think about it? Why Russia didn't intervene in Russia, knowing that, Russia didn't intervene in Armenia, knowing that Armenia is a partner and an ally for Russia, and the president back then, or the prime minister back then, Serge Sarkisyan, was a friend of Putin. And despite all the talk about his corruption and oligarchy and all this stuff, Pashinyan has been in power now for 4 years. And he literally changed like the entire judicial judicial system, and the personalities who are influential in the judicial system, and the security officials, the military officials. So if he has like evidence against the past presidents or the past leaders, he should have sent them to jail right now. Like, it's been almost 4 years now, so we haven't seen this. Vasic continues. He says, it is important to note that all three factors, so we have the economic factor, the military factor, and the informational factor, lean on each other. You asked the right question. when you ask about pro-Russian governments that allow NGOs that are funded by Soros to operate in countries like Ukraine and Kazakhstan, also in Armenia. The reason is that they are not really pro-Russian, or more precisely, Russia doesn't have as much as control over them as people think. For example, Nazarbayev's government was trying to assimilate Russians in Kazakhstan, and it allowed these NGOs to operate freely. Many countries in the Russian sphere of influence have pro-Western elites that keep their money in Western banks. Now, I agree with the limitation of Russian influence over the countries that evolve in this Russian sphere of influence. And one of the examples of this is also Syria. Now, it's been almost 10 years that we've been bombarded with the information that Putin owns Syria and Assad is now his puppet, and now that Assad doesn't have any control over his country and Russia is managing the government and the foreign affairs and the military operations. Of course, Russia has influence in Syria. Nobody can deny that. But also, Russia has its limitations in this in this aspect. So we cannot say Russia owns Syria. They don't, and I don't think they have this wish to control Syria. But at the same time, Assad has its own periphery of influence in Syria, and we cannot really simplify the situation by saying Assad controls everything or Russia owns everything. No, they are cooperating together underground when it comes to the military aspect, and also at the same time when it comes to the economic cooperation. So it's a complete strategic partnership between both sides. But funny enough, there is a new article published in a magazine called New Lines, and the title of the article says Assad tests the patience of its ally Russia. And the author goes further saying, reading the tea leaves in the Moscow press and elsewhere, it is clear that Putin has his limits with the Damascus dictator. So after years or a decade of saying that Russia owns Syria, now they also claim that Assad is not going along with the policies or all the policies of Putin. So Putin is somehow mad now and he's ordering his media to attack President Assad. And this notion is very funny because one of the examples that this article mentions is Russia Today Arabic website. And I worked in Russia Arabic website a few years ago. I can tell you it's a mess. And the editorial line is very vague. So when you go to the Russia Today Arabic channel, you can see different content comparing to the Russia Today Arabic website, which is somehow mind-blowing, right? And there are certain authors working with Russia Today Arabic. They have a Muslim Brotherhood background and they write critique against Assad. And in my opinion, if you ask me, that's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, Russia Today proves that they have a variety of opinions. They have more freedom of expression in their website comparing to websites or magazines or newspapers who claim that they are free and democratic, right? And the notion also of saying that Putin ordered Russia Today Arabic to write articles is so ridiculous on so many levels. Like they think Putin is just controlling everything and is just making calls and telling the media to attack Assad. Anyways, Vasich also continues saying there is also a connection between economic and military factors. Many times, elites of some countries have their money in the West and they try to sabotage military response to these color revolutions. This happened many times, most recently in Kazakhstan, where many in the Kazakh military surrendered without a fight. One can assume that this is due to the fact that someone told them to do so and that this someone got bribed with American dollars. Now, I want to draw parallels with Syria again. I don't know how much truth in this when it comes to Kazakhstan, but I'm 100% confident that maybe tens, maybe hundreds of Syrian army officers, some of them low-ranking officers, some of them high-ranking officers, were bribed at the beginning, especially in 2011 and 2012. These 2 years were very crucial, and Qatar, mainly Qatar, and then Turkey and Saudi Arabia bribed SAA Syrian army officers to encourage them to defect. And we've seen like they were going like on daily basis on Al Jazeera, and they show their military ID and say, my name is da da da, I'm from this brigade number X, and then I declare my defection, and they escaped to Turkey or to Jordan back then, and then some of them stayed in some Gulf countries or Turkey, mainly in Turkey, and some others maybe fled to Europe. So when this bribing happened, these officers left their brigades and posts exposed to the terrorists, or even worse, they sent orders of withdrawal to their soldiers, and then they withdrew their posts. The terrorists came and occupied, and one of the clear examples of this is Aleppo. In mid-2012, the head of the military security branch of Aleppo, he was bribed by Turkey, and he changed the posts of the Syrian army on the suburbs of Aleppo. And when he was trying, so the militants stormed the city because there were no protection. And when he was trying to escape to Turkey, he was murdered. So we do not know till now if he was murdered by an airstrike by Syrian army, or the Turks killed him after he started working with them. We still don't know that. Now the question of this episode is, what can Russia do to prevent these color revolutions? This is a very important question. Vasic says, one way is with military power, which they did in Kazakhstan, but alone is not enough. There needs to be a way to counter the other two pillars on which these color revolutions stand on. Due to the fact that the Russian economy is not that strong in the short term, they will have to rely on China to help out pro-Russian governments to develop economically and solve the economic aspects of color revolution. In the long run, they could potentially use global warming to develop the north and even build a northern sea route that will bring lots of money to Russia. But in the short term, cooperation with China is imperative. This is, I think he is making a comment after I said there is a theory that says global warming will help Russia, especially in the north when the ice melts. China also has reasons to cooperate, as it will not want pro-Western vassal states to be formed that will aid the West in its trade war against China. Now, I agree with this notion, but I have to ask a question here that I don't have the answer for it. Maybe you know better than I do. What are the environmental implications of melting the ice in the north? Now, we know that there are maybe millions of cubics of gas there, and Russia cannot extract that, and they will be able to do that, and they will also be able to use the Northern Sea as a trade route. But what are the implications of the global warming, or what are the implications of melting this ice? Because we know the sea levels will increase, and we also know that some countries, especially those are like island states or semi-island states like Japan, like Netherlands, they will be the most affected. Or this is what we have been told to believe in. I don't know. So will there be any negative implications on Russia if the ice melts? Will there be any hurricanes or any, I don't know. Maybe you know. Let me know in the comments. Finally, he says, there is another strategy that Russia can use, and it has been using recently. They can allow some of these color revolutions to succeed in some places, but then cut them off from all gas supplies and China can cut them off from its market. This is probably the worst way to deal with these color revolutions when you look at it from the perspective of the people living in these countries. But it is the best way for China and Russia to deal with them given their lack of information influence. Vasic continues saying the main reason for this is because the USA will have to fund these countries where the color revolution took place, and that will take a lot of money. The only reason why Germany and Japan are now American allies is that the USA helped them develop their economy. The question is, can the United States do it again and do it better than China? Good question. If the answer is no, then the same conditions that led to pro-Western color revolution, mainly poverty due to sanctions and exclusion from the Western markets, can be recreated with the exclusion from Chinese markets. Now, the question here is, does China want to copy the US model of sanctions and exclusion? This is a legitimate question, because as far as I can see, it seems that the answer is no. And Beijing is willing to deal and do trade with almost all countries, regardless of their political or ideological position. But if this color revolution was quite harmful to China and Russia, in a way that they can change the balance of power decisively on the side of the United States, then maybe. I would say maybe Beijing changes its behavior in this regard. The Vasic continues, this is the last paragraphs. The key factor here will be depolarization, which, if successful, will lead to fewer countries using the dollar, and by extension, the United States will have to be more careful in how it spends its money. That could lead to the United States having less money to spend on making their revolutions, or having less money to spend on improving these countries where the color revolution is made. While Japan and Germany developed quickly after World War II, many of today's American projects are complete disasters. Just take a look at economic tigers such as Ukraine, Georgia, and Kosovo. They are a far cry from post-World War II economic success stories such as South Korea, Japan, or Germany. None of these countries where the color revolution succeeded have anything going for them, and they are less likely to support the West as time goes on. As time passes by and these countries do not improve, people will be less and less likely to attempt any color revolution. I think this is very important analysis, this last paragraph. And I think the people in Armenia, also the youth, there is a considerable number of younger Armenian generation are becoming aware that maybe they were fooled into the notion that if they just remove Said Sarkisian, their lives will be better dramatically in a very short time. And there are increasing voices I can see also on social media of intellectual Armenians, whether in my age or younger, and they're being very critical of the current government in Armenia, and especially the Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, when it comes to his economic policies and foreign policy policies, and also domestically. Pashinyan claims that he is a very liberal, pro-freedom leader, and his critiques, when they become influential, they're being beaten up in the streets, they're being arrested, and they're being also sent to jails. Now, Vasic concludes his brilliant analysis by saying economic factor is the key here. And while all other factors matter as well, if China and Russia can win an economic battle with the United States, then they have a good chance of preventing these color revolutions and changing the mind of world youth. So Vasic basically, he supported his argument with three factors. The main one for him is economic, and I agree with him that when the economic conditions are improved in the post-Soviet Union countries and in countries such as now Armenia or such as Georgia or Ukraine, there won't be a need for a color revolution. But when I said the cultural influence or hegemony is important, I wanted also to say that the way the Russian and the Chinese need to market their models to the youth in these countries is very imperative. It's very important. This is one of the main pillars of any superpower, of any power that wants to be a superpower, historically and until this moment. I do not want to exclude the cultural hegemony. I still believe it's important. I still believe that if you want to improve the economic situation in countries that revolve in the sphere of influence of Russia, and I mean Moscow wants to improve, they need also to have a marketing power. They need to have a cultural dimension for it in order to, I don't want to say erase, but to change this mindset or the notion that Russia is Soviet Union, and because some of these countries had not the most pleasant experiences with the Soviet Union, so they're rejecting it. So Russia needs to have a cultural dimension, whether through ideology, whether through education. They need to find a way to market themselves to the youth, and this cannot only be through economic or military means, but also through cultural means. So this was an important analysis by Vasic. I wanted to share with you, and I wanted to make some comments on it, and I wanted to draw parallels with Armenia, with Ukraine, and with Syria. But what do you think about it? I have raised a few questions in this video. I would like to hear your opinion about them, and I would like you to write your opinions in the comment section below. I'm reading the comments, and I would like to engage with you guys more. And that's it. If you're new, guys, if this is your first time, make sure to subscribe, and please make sure that even if you think you're subscribed, make sure that you are, and click on the like button. It really helps me with the algorithm of YouTube, and it brings it higher in the list of the suggestions. And if you want to support Syriana analysis financially, you can become a patron. You can pay only $2 per month. It's a really big help for me to continue and create such videos for you in the future. And see you next time.